Welcome to today's interactive conversation on marketing data management presented by NetProspex and the Aberdeen Group. My name is Michael Powers, and I will be your moderator today. Before we start, let's take a moment to ensure that everyone is ready and familiar with the webinar control panel. First, you should have a control panel on the right side of your screen. This panel can be minimized by clicking on the double arrow button in the upper left corner of your screen. You may also expand the panel by clicking the same button. Secondly, if you have any questions during the presentation, please submit them in the chat section of the webinar control panel. We will do our best to answer all of your questions after the presentation. And if we are unable to get to your question, we will answer them in the next few days. You can also contribute to the conversation on Twitter by using our specialized hashtag #NTPXData. All right, so let's get started. Today's presenters are Senior Research Analyst for the Aberdeen Group, Kucera, and CMO of NetProspex, Slayton. Thank you both for being here today. And now I will pass it off to Derek so we may begin.
Okay, thanks, Michael. Appreciate the intro there, and thanks to my co-presenter, Trip, for joining us on this webinar. And thanks to everybody out there on the phone for joining us as well. We've got a fairly compact 30 to 40 minutes here to take you through kind of some of our thoughts on what we're seeing in the market with respect to marketing data and the challenges and opportunities that lie within it. We'll have time at the end for Q&A, and just to reiterate, we'd love to dig into Q&A around the questions you guys have out there as you're thinking about this. So please do make sure to enter those questions into the chat box or question box on the GoToWebinar panel. We're looking forward to that section of the presentation in particular. But we do have some prepared content here, from both myself and Trip that will take up the first 20 to 25 minutes of the proceedings. And with that, I'll get started. So just a real quick, advertisement, if you will, for who we are at NetProspex for those of you that may be just coming into our universe and learning about us. We're really focused on helping marketers be better at connecting to their target market through smarter data management. And I think, internally we're kind of really strong in two really important areas. One is in the B2B space, we're really good at understanding contacts, roles, and company information across companies of all sizes and roles and responsibilities across every aspect of the organization. And more importantly, we've built an integrated process to kind of periodically and continuously validate, cleanse, enrich, and kind of stitch together and curate contact and company information in a way that allows B2B marketers to connect with the people they want to connect with based on their target market profile, and as importantly, continuously keep their contact data, their marketing data, up to snuff, as it were, in terms of quality, connectability, and fit for purpose. We've been in business for about 7 years now. We kind of cut our teeth in the data side and being really good at collecting that content database. And over the last year and a half, we've started to evolve our business to work with customers like NetSuite on how do we kind of unleash our data services and our data expertise on their data internally and our customers' data internally to make their data better. So that's just a quick overview of who we are, and what we're really seeing out in the market that kind of speaks to the change or the alteration in kind of what we're doing from a service perspective is that, if you think about what we're all trying to do, myself as a CMO for NetProspex, and I'm sure all of you out there on the phone as marketing people, salespeople, is really convert people that and contact information that you have into engaged, interested individuals that first and foremost fit the target profile you're trying to sell to, the fit for purpose of the solution or product that you're bringing to market, that are complete and accurate in terms of the connection and details around the contact info, and that frankly are ready to engage with your sales team. And I think we all live and breathe in a world where marketing is measured more increasingly on its ability to contribute to revenue, and a big piece of that is delivering the right contact with the right information in the right market to the right salesperson at the point at which that contact is ready to engage with a salesperson. And as we all know, as buyers are becoming more more capable of doing their own research, really the onus is on marketing to carry the ball farther down the field before that buyer is ready to engage with the sales team. So having good and valid contact info is certainly an important piece of that, and companies that do that better are far more successful, as Tripp will get into in his presentation in a few minutes. And when we look at the machine that kind of sits between your historical data that you've collected and works incredibly hard to get into your contact database, and the new data that comes in every day from your website, from your marketing programs, from any events you may be doing, or any other digital marketing and inbound marketing activities, those leads and that contact info feeds into, an increasing number of you out there have built or bought automation capabilities and focus primarily on content generation capabilities to automate the process of delivering great content to your buyer along that buyer's journey. And really what we've found working with our customers is that data management cog is super critical to making the revenue engine run more efficiently. And frankly, if it's not handled effectively, that data can become a decelerator to your success. It can become, if you will, sand in the engine that makes you less efficient at driving engaged leads to your sales teams. And a big source of that friction around bad data comes from the fact that 88% of people that fill out forms in the IT space, at least, admit to lying on the forms, and more than 50 million people every year change jobs. And there's lots of reasons why data is a living, breathing organism and needs to be treated as such. And for those of you that haven't seen it, I'd encourage you to go and download our State of Marketing Data report, benchmark report, which we issued about 7 or 8 months ago. Covers kind of what we see from dealing with thousands of customers just like you and looking at their data and collecting information about their marketing data so that we can all understand what's the state of the industry, as it were. So please, if you haven't seen it, it's on our website. I'd encourage you to go and download it, and it gives you a good sense for maybe where you are in comparison with your peers. We'll also be refreshing that in the next couple of months to look at the next year and the next round of data, so stay tuned for that, obviously. But really, that source of friction around bad data is a challenge for a lot of marketers, and I think what we're finding is that customers that are attacking that challenge head-on are seeing dramatic success and improvements as a result. And that's really what, Tripp has been out there kind of looking at this market. He was certainly an early analyst in this kind of market, and the folks at Aberdeen have been doing some great work to kind of understand what the results you can expect from doing better data management might be based on what they're seeing out in the market. And he's been so graceful as to come in and share some time with us and with you on what they're seeing. So the next chunk of the presentation here will focus kind of from Tripp's perspective, what's going on in the market and what are they seeing kind of at an industry level around lead management and data management as a subset of that. So with that, Tripp, I'll thank you again for joining us and turn it over to you to kind of walk the folks and myself through your content here.
Great, Derek. Thank you very much, and thanks to NetProspex for inviting me here to share some of this great research with your audience today. Your opening comments were, are really spot on in terms of some of the larger trends that we see around the challenges and the realities of modern marketing, right? I sometimes call this I sometimes call this my Lady Gaga slide. It's not that she's a perfect 10 necessarily. It's that marketers know today that good leads aren't born that way. They're really forged in this kind of crucible of content interactions that are happening. And so, we all remember when sales comes to us and say, no, we really want those quote unquote good leads. Well, those leads don't just happen. And what this number is pointing to is a metric of how many marketing-driven touches are required on average to take a prospect, a raw lead, through their buying journey, through their decision journey, to the point of being a closed won opportunity. And it really points to the marketer's view and the marketer's challenge created by the hidden sales cycle of all the content and connections and community that are creating this ability for buyers to get so informed, to answer almost all of their own questions before they reach sales formally. And as you point out, Derek, that means that marketing needs to carry the ball further down the field. I love that analogy. And it's this number. It's driving adoption of marketing automation platforms, driving adoption of content that matters. And as we'll see, it's really driving and forcing the need for really good data management practices for marketers. Now, not all marketers are embracing this, and what we're going to show is in some slides a little bit later is the difference between companies that have good processes in place and companies that don't, in terms of some metrics that are near and dear to the hearts of a lot of folks on the line today, which is my conversion rate, my website conversion rate, and the reach of my marketing database at the end of the day. How are we going to do that? Well, Aberdeens Research is all about the voice of the end user. So it's all about finding out what practitioners, in the case of my practice, that's marketing practitioners, the marketing leadership role. What's driving their thinking, what's driving their challenges, what are the pressures that they're facing, what are the strategic actions that they're taking to execute on their goals, and what are the capabilities and the technology that they're using, across people, process, and technology to really execute on those strategic initiatives. And we look at all of that through the lens of performance, and we develop essentially performance-based benchmarks. So we look at what are high-performing companies, and we define that based on several metrics, and I'll share those in just a moment. But we're basically asking the question: what are these high-performing companies? Who are the high-performing companies in our study, and what do they do differently? What are the capabilities? What are the traits that correlate highly with that performance? It's kind of like getting to look over the shoulder of the smartest kids in class and find out how they organize their notebook, right? And so it's really, we're going to learn from that and identify the best practices through by looking at what high-performing companies do differently. And these are the metrics that we use to determine the best in class, the high performers, the top 20% in this study. So we looked at how efficiently they were passing leads to sales, and what percentage of those leads were actioned, right? How good was their marketing and sales alignment? We're looking at their contribution to the sales forecasted pipeline, looking at how much they've been able to grow that year over year, and also how much that corresponds into revenue, how much they've been able to grow revenue year over year. But of course, these aren't the only metrics we capture. We also capture a whole range of metrics related to conversion metrics and cost of lead and all kinds of funnel metrics. But what that allows us to do is then look at those metrics in isolation and say, all right, well, what does being a high performer in these things, what does that lead to? What does that generate? What's the ROI of that at the end of the day? And this is one way of kind of visualizing what we call the value of the difference. It's about yield. It's about what you put in versus what you get out. And so we do a little bit of a funnel economic analysis here in aggregate of our respondents, and we can see, doing a kind of change ratio analysis, that if you're a best-in-class company, you need on average about 64 marketing responses to generate a closed deal because of the efficiency which you're able to move those through. If you're a lagger, you need an average of over 600. That's a 10x difference, just about a 10x difference. So just folks are looking to kind of share some thoughts from this presentation. I would urge them to tweet this, right? Best-in-class companies need 10 times fewer marketing generated leads to generate that customer. And what's behind that are all the capabilities that we're going to be talking about, and I'm going to be talking about in just a moment here.
It's an amazing stat, Trip. I mean, just the fact of looking at that 10x multiplier of the economics of being really good at this versus not being so good. And I think I certainly understand your comment around not being the smartest kid in class, but being really good at looking over the smartest kid's shoulder. Because I think this is a good way of understanding why it's important, just from an economic standpoint and ability to deliver standpoint. Why it's important to get better frankly, at adopting some of the things we're going to talk about here. Just a quick question on responses. You're talking about just kind of any response, right? So a click-through, a response to an email program, or another touch point that you're measuring on this chart?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Well, it's called different things by different marketing groups.
Right.
We used to call it a response versus a lead, right? A lead was qualified. A response was just simply a new contact. Some folks will call it a raw lead versus a marketing qualified or an unqualified lead. So yeah, it's just a name, right? It's a name and an email.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah, and so your point is really well taken, and you don't have to go too far in terms of doing some additional arithmetic when you start thinking about, all right, what's my cost per marketing generated lead or my cost per response? So what's the difference between best in class and laggards in terms of how much it actually costs to just acquire a customer? We did this analysis on our content marketing study and found that the difference was on average $10,000 per customer acquisition cost, and we could do a similar analysis here. I imagine it would be actually a little bit higher because the deltas are higher. So you can really start to kind of do some math and realize what the impact of this. But what's driving this is just the efficiency of being able to move things forward. And we know that today, because of the amount of information, because of the competition for attention out there, the buyers are so discerning about the kinds of content, the kinds of offers, if you will, that they're going to interact with. And that makes it so important to target and to focus the efforts of that content and focus the message. And this is often the difference between, we hear a lot about mid-funnel conversion being a real challenge, right? Moving from, MQL into an SQL or into a sales accepted lead. I think a big part of where that's falling down, and we'll take a look at what the high performers are doing, is ultimately the ability to, better target and better offer highly relevant content, highly relevant messages to the folks that you've attracted in the first place. But backing up a minute, I think I mentioned in the outset that those 10 touches, right, the need to nurture that context, that's really what we see driving adoption of marketing automation platforms, marketing automation suites, and that's why we see about a 40%. So the best-in-class companies are about 40% more likely than all others to be using a marketing automation software suite to begin with, and so. Folks know that you need some automation, you need some way of kind of making sense and tracking, tracking all of those touches and tracking what's happening. And you mentioned marketing automation, and you immediately start thinking, lead scoring and lead nurturing as kind of the methods of making sense of the madness here, right? Of putting some structure around the progression of your contacts, your leads through their buying cycle. One thing we find though is that many companies are ultimately kind of keeping a Ferrari of marketing automation. Maybe they're not even driving. It could be a Ferrari, it could be a Porsche, could even just be a Ford. It doesn't matter. They're keeping this high-powered machine in the garage, right? They're really not fully taking advantage of the capabilities. And this slide really paints that picture really well. So what you're looking at is, of all the companies that are using marketing automation, what are the functional elements, the functional components of that suite, of that platform that they're actually actively using. And so you can see a couple of things here. First of all, you see that, best-in-class firms are much more likely to fully utilize the marketing automation platform. So you see that, going down into reporting and analytics and so forth, that they're 95% are using this, and even down into lead scoring and lead nurturing, full 70-75% of the best-in-class firms. But then you also see this big gap between best in class and the other companies, particularly once you get past email and landing page. And this includes, by the way, segmentation. So we see the same thing happening around segmentation as a capability within this, and we see a big drop off there. We all know we're competing for attention, and so being able to provide really relevant content is the relevancy is really our currency for continuing that conversation. And so ultimately the question is, what's the missing link here? What is it that best-in-class companies are doing, both to achieve those outsized, benefits that we saw earlier on, all the conversion metric performance that they're doing, as well as just to be able to take advantage of all the horsepower that they have under the hoods of their marketing automation and marketing systems. And what we'll see is there are a number of factors, right? There are a number of factors that are contributing to success, and that's one of the things that our research really points out. There's these kinds of systems of factors, things that tend to work together, and I'll show an example in just a minute related to content marketing. But clearly, we can draw the line and say that data and data management is a big part of this equation here. So this is one way of seeing that. We see a number of capabilities on this slide related to the ability of best-in-class companies to just get smarter about their contacts and the buyer behavior of the buyer behind that contact, right? So whether it's capturing what our contacts are doing, across channels and bringing that into a central view so that we can, score off of that and really understand, where the buyer is and where they are in their journey and their decision path, and make some smart decisions about, how we're going to interact with them next, and also present a really complete view to sales when we do have that handoff of, right now content is the context, right? So of a conversation that's been ongoing. And a lot of times sales doesn't have that context, and that can lead to some issues in terms of that lead not being brought into the pipeline because sales is kind of coming at it completely new, forgetting that there's already been all of this conversation, all this content that they've interacted with. We could talk more about that at another day, though.
Right.
And you see this around defining personas, right, and being able to market to personas, using website or capturing social profile information in the contact data. So just best-in-class companies are just getting really just a lot smarter about who the buyer is, what they're up to, and that's corresponding to, what should I deliver to them, where are they at, are they ready for that conversation, do they need to be nurtured more? There's all kinds of things that drives.
Right. So it speaks really, Trip, to the ability to segment at the high level, right? Who are they? Where do they come from? What type of business are they in? What's their role? And then what kind of behavior have they shown historically, so that I can present them with the right piece of content or the right next engagement ask based on both of those things. And I think really this chart to me speaks to kind of both of those axes, segmentability and behavioral understanding for, maintaining touch through that 10-touch process that has to occur now in order for someone to decide to do business with you. Because if you lose them between 5 and 6, or even worse, between 7 and 8, you've invested all that time and money that's now, no longer worthy.
Yeah, absolutely. And here's another good example, right, where you mentioned content at the beginning of the presentation. This is a slide that I stole for myself from our content marketing research, but it was so applicable to this. And you see the right two here, which is the difference between leaders and followers in terms of aligning marketing content to the funnel stage and to the buyer persona. And you see the gap here. So it's, this is really the difference of being able to effectively convert the investment that you have made in acquiring that contact, in the first place. And I think a lot gets lost when, we bring that contact in, but then we don't, we just throw stuff at them. We just throw, interesting content. It might be great, interesting content, but if it's not answering the question that they have at that moment of their buyer's journey, then it's ultimately not relevant. Maybe interesting, but ultimately not relevant, and ultimately not really building that buyer's vision that we as marketers now need to do. And so there's some, a number of, we get a little bit more specific around marketing data management, marketing data practices. We clearly see that, better marketing requires better data and begets better, kind of data processes and processes that are dependent on good data. We want to automate a lot of our interactions, but can we really trust the data that's driving that automation, that's driving that next step? We see the difference between best in class and others in terms of, for example, giving campaign staff the ability to directly do segmentation. Best in class more likely to be doing that. Dynamically segmenting audiences based on persona or based on rules, and ultimately aligning the contacts we have, the data we have with our overall strategy. And what you're looking at here is the rate at which best-in-class companies indicate how effective they are versus industry average and laggards at a couple really key marketing data management capabilities. So we talked about segmentation a moment ago, and this is firms that indicate on a 1 to 5 scale that they're a 4 or a 5 in terms of their level of effectiveness of being able to do this. So it's not, do you have this ability today? It's just, how well are you able to actually do this today?
Right.
So you see the difference. I mean, big difference here for best in class. And then, and again, similar numbers and a similar gap between best in class and others when it comes to really managing the marketing data. I mean, this is just the block and tackle of, doing cleansing and doing deduplication, doing data appends, really just kind of getting your arms around, your database and kind of keeping it clean. This should be really the foundation of building an, marketing automation strategy, because data is ultimately driving so much of what we're trying to do there, whether it's a segmentation or whether it's a next step or whether it's doing some persona-based marketing, which a lot of companies are either embracing or moving towards and trying to adopt.
It's amazing, Trip, because if you look at it, it really is, just because you're doing data management doesn't mean you're going to be best in class. Obviously, you've got a lot of data here that says there's a bunch of things you need to do to be best in class, but it's pretty clear, A, that you want to be best in class based on the metrics you showed at the beginning of the presentation, right, the conversion rates to a customer. And also, it's pretty clear from this chart, to me at least, that a key litmus test in whether or not you're using best in class processes is, are you really taking a strategic look at what your marketing database can do for you from a segmentation standpoint, and are you doing the right things to your marketing database from a management standpoint to keep it, healthy? And it really does prove to be anybody who's best in class, almost 3 out of 4, 4 out of 5 are doing those things. So it truly is kind of a leading indicator, if you will.
We had a study I did a little bit earlier in the year on kind of looking at trends around big data in marketing, right? And you didn't have to be doing big data to participate in the study. We were just trying to get a sense of kind of where the market is. So one of the things we found in that study is that 98% of companies that we surveyed, 98%, plan to increase their investment in data-driven marketing over the next 12 months. So that's doing things like, segmentation certainly, but starting to do some analytics, some predictive analytics, and that kind of thing. I mean, forget about that. Forget about big data for marketing if you don't have really good, solid, quality data that's kind of driving all of this underneath of it. Not to mention all of the ancillary benefits around, your sender score and just getting, good kind of clean metrics of what's happening, what's happening in your funnel, which are I think for a lot of companies that have a lot of bad data, they get a really kind of slanted view of what's really going on, right? And their open rates, their click-through rates could actually be a lot higher, but they're basing it on a kind of a faulty, kind of underlying denominator.
Right.
I think another point, and I'll finish with this and a few other slides related to it, is that this isn't just about kind of doing this once and then kind of forgetting about it for for a year, for 6 months. I think that a lot of firms I see, there's like a big data, like not big data as in quote unquote big data, but like a data project, a data initiative that's kicked off, and we're going to get our database, we're going to get it up to spec, and then it's kind of like forgotten about. And I think you had some great metrics about the level of churn, right, that's happening in terms of the way people move around and how much of your marketing database is kind of turning over every year. You can't, this really needs to go and be an ongoing process, particularly if you're particularly as you're bringing in new contacts and you want to start doing new segmentation. So what we see here is that best-in-class companies are significantly more likely, nearly twice that of all other firms, to have a well-established process for maintaining and managing the marketing database, updating, removing bad emails, duplicate records, just managing it, having good kind of data, underlying data hygiene and underlying marketing database management practices. And we can kind of go a step further here, and I alluded to this in the beginning, which is let's look at what these companies, the companies with this process in place, let's look at their performance versus others. Now, again, caveat here that, so this is my tweet this blurb here, best-in-class companies, more than 2x as likely as laggards have well-established marketing data processes in place. So as we look at the data in a moment, which we're essentially pivoting on these users versus non-users, so companies with this capability versus companies that don't have it, certainly keep in mind this is correlation, not causation. As you mentioned, Derek, there's a lot of other factors that are contributing to success, and that these practices tend to come in bunches, right? People that are doing one thing right are often doing a lot of things right because they all kind of lead into one another. That said, the differences here are really significant, are really striking. You see on the left here the difference in terms of average click-through rate on email campaigns. So some of this might be, as I just mentioned, some of this might be just getting a much cleaner, clearer view of what the kind of the real data is. But the other is all the other things that go along with it, which is the ability of doing segmentations, the ability of more precisely targeting the message and the content that I'm delivering and aligning that to where the buyer is and who the buyer is and what question they need to answer. And so that's ultimately going to lead to nearly twice the click-through rate versus companies that don't have these processes. And then we see similar results around kind of conversion rates. So the bottom one here on the bottom right is that that raw lead to the MQL state. So this is how effectively folks are taking people that raise their hand and qualifying them and understanding and bringing them further through the funnel. And then the second is moving them from that really critical mid-funnel conversion stage, which is where a lot of companies get hung up because it's really easy for folks to raise their hand. It's much more difficult to kind of get funding and make it a priority in your business. So a lot of people, obviously, that's why that conversion rate is like 20%, right? A lot of people drop off. But you see the difference here between companies that have these good practices in place and companies that don't. And then finally, go ahead, Derek.
Sorry, Trip. That slide in particular really strikes home for me because a lot of the folks that we talk to are folks that are in the trenches that have been, running the marketing automation platform, that have been living and breathing the marketing database, and I think intrinsically know that the best course of action for their company is to fix and improve the stuff they already have versus over-investing and going and buying new stuff. And this slide by itself is really a great way for those of you on the phone that are kind of struggling with that. And like I said, we talk to a lot of people every day that have that sentiment exactly as to kind of how do I sell data management into my team, into my organization as a priority for me, because you know it is. You know, the stats here really accentuate a great way to take this, you know, to your VP of marketing or to your CFO and say, look, I can tell you that we have good data. If we make that data better, you know, we'll be increasingly more capable of delivering better MQLs, better SQLs, better whatever it is that you're measuring as part of your lead flow and your waterfall. So it's a really great slide to kind of help with those on the phone. I'm sure there's some of them that wake up every day and they know they need to make their data better, but, you know, run into a roadblock when they try to prioritize it as a spend item versus, you know, buying a new list or sponsoring or whatever. You know, I think this really speaks to me in terms of helping with that conversation. So it's a great set of stats.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's just add one more for them, which is that this ultimately leads to, you know, kind of better data and more data, right? Again, so some of this is going to be impacted by having just a better view of what's going on. So, you know, when we ask this question, for example, which is what is the year-over-year change in the number of contacts you have in your marketing database, the companies that didn't have this process in place, you imagine, were significantly more likely to have no idea, right? To just not be able to answer the question because they were like, you know, gosh, I just don't know. Whereas
right.
Companies that have this process, as you'd imagine, just have a much clearer idea. And then because they've gone through these processes, they're getting rid of a lot of the bad data, and so they're building off of a real baseline versus what they think is their baseline. But then on top of that is everything we've been talking about, which is better data leads to, you know, better marketing, better targeting of offers and content, and ultimately when you're targeting better and delivering more relevant message, you're getting, you know, fewer opt-outs, and you're attracting more people that are interested in, you know, kinds of things that you have to say and the kinds of problems and challenges that you can help them with, or you can help solve for them.
Right. Yeah, no, that's a great, I mean, I think it's a great way of looking at it. I know a number of people do measure their success based on their ability to grow their marketing database. And I think when you look at it on a percentage basis, and you also, you know, to use a term we use internally a lot, lower the denominator by removing the stuff you know you don't want or the stuff you know isn't good, you're able to drive that percentage mathematically. I wasn't a math major, but I certainly know this. If you reduce the number by eliminating the bad, you're going to show a better percentage increase by adding more good. And I think, you know, obviously for those people that do measure that, I think it's a good stat to measure. Frankly, we measure it here in our team. How quickly and rapidly are we growing our known universe of contacts that we think are the right people at the right companies? You know, purging out the bad stuff certainly helps to deliver, better metrics around that piece. But just kind of transitioning off of that, for us, we have this conversation a lot with our customers. It's not really about more, it's about better, which kind of takes your slide and turns the words around a bit. But, we like to have conversations with our customers about, before you come to us to buy data, right? Don't just come buy data because you need more leads. Let's talk about what data you have, what we can do to make that data better, and then where we can identify hotspots where you're seeing great performance or you have a good strategic initiative planned, or gaps that you may have based on your business strategy and your data. And those are the kinds of conversations, and that's the way we want to have the conversations with our customers around data management. And, recently we've launched our Workbench product, which is up in the cloud, that allows customers to do a lot of the things you were talking about, Trip, which is understand their data, segment their data, and improve the way they approach their data through an easy-to-use tool that's, increasingly built into their marketing automation platform should they choose to use it. And what we do with our solution set there is really help customers, number one, assess the current state of their data and how well their data may map to their business strategy. For instance, one of our customers, Confio, did a data health scan, understood that they were missing certain important pieces of their data, and then engaged with us as to how they could, deliver on that business initiative based on what they knew after having gone through the assessment of their data. in total, which is difficult to do, frankly, if you don't have some sophisticated analytics tools. And then from there, how do you cleanse your data, right? So this is kind of what you need to do in order to really go soup to nuts in continuous marketing data management. Understand it, then you got to cleanse it, right? You've got to get the stuff that you know, or spam traps, or undeliverable emails, or non-connectable phones, or people that don't exist in the organization anymore, and you got to remove them out of your database, right? No point continuing to try to deliver to those emails. You're only driving your sender reputation down. You're actually impacting your marketing metrics because you're measuring a bigger numerator than you should, frankly. And then after you've done that, how do you take the data you have, understand it better, and enrich it and append critical firmographic and intelligence pieces that help you understand who that person is, who that company is, what segment of the market they may be in, what role they might have within the organization, even what kinds of technology they might have deployed inside their organization, so you can be smarter about the way you message to them. And then having done all that, where do you have gaps in your data strategy? So where are you missing contacts or company data that you know you need based on a product launch you're coming to market with, or a new sales process you're initiating, or a new sales team you've got from an acquisition? So how can you grow your data intelligently based on understanding what you have and mapping it to what you need? And those are really the right steps in terms of the process you want to go through, and the way we work with our customers. For instance, NetSuite came to us and said, we bought data from you for years, and we love the way that you deliver great, clean, validated contact information for us and the companies we want. Is there any way that you can run our data through your cleansing process? And that's kind of what got us started on this path. And they've been increasingly more successful by having gone through that management layer of cleansing and validating their data on a regular basis. And the folks at ReadyTalk, used us to overlay that technology information for their application, which went into a specific segment of the market, and having an understanding of what technologies were deployed in the companies that they had in their database gave them an ability to be more intelligent as to how they segmented their database, and then how they sent a more actionable, targeted message to those segments based on what they knew about the company and the contact of the company. So, just to kind of try to apply some ideas for you guys out there on the phone and listening in as to how you might think about, Trip just outlined why this thing is so important and is going to make you that much more successful. These are just some ways to think about the process you may want to take in order to kind of get through and get up that curve, get to best in class, as it were. One other important piece we feel is that it's got to be built into your existing workflows and into your existing systems. So we've done a lot of work with Eloqua and Marketo, frankly, for those of you that are using those platforms, to make data management capable, both on the way in as data's coming into your system. We talked a lot about getting conversion rates up and collecting less information on the web form, but getting that information appended so that you have it for scoring and routing purposes. And then also behind the curtain to continuously manage the data that you already have, and to do it in a way that doesn't require you as a marketer. We're not database admins. We don't have data expertise internally, and we understand that here at NetProspex. We do have it, but not on my marketing team. Leveraging a vendor, frankly, that has expertise in this matter is a really good idea, especially given the fact that Trip mentioned this isn't a one-time thing. So even if you do roll up your sleeves and do it through brute force, are you going to be ready to do that again in 2 or 3 months as that data evolves and decays over time? But I think the best first step you can take, right, in terms of actionable things coming out of this discussion, is to just go and do an assessment. And our data health scan is part of our Workbench product. It's going to give you near real-time visibility to your data set. We're going to overlay all of the information we have about your data that you might not have, because we have the same data in our database. And we're going to give you the ability to understand what your data looks like in a current state fashion, so we can make a smart decision about how we might help you, and you can make an informed decision about what strategy you may want to employ as it comes to adopting data management inside your organization to get all those things, all those benefits that Trip covered, through his great research that they've done out in the market. So those are the next steps, right? You can go visit Workbench today, put your data up in our system, see the results. 100,000 records will give you results in 3 or 4 minutes. Or feel free to connect. You have Trip and my email addresses from the beginning of the presentation. We've got the generic email here. If you just want to lob a question into our data experts, we'll be happy to work with you. But those are the next steps I see. There's obviously a bunch more content on this. We have the full report that Trip wrote about the data management results that he covered with you. That's on our website. You can certainly download it and read it. And there's a bunch of other content we have that kind of help you understand what this all means and can mean for you as you go through your thought process. So that kind of concludes the prepared material. I'm sure there are a bunch of questions. Michael, I'll turn it back over to you to kind of MC it, if you will, and serve the questions up for Trip and I.
All right, great. Thanks, Derek, and thank you both of you for having a great presentation. Just wanted to remind everyone that we will do our best to answer any questions that were submitted during the presentation. However, if we don't get to your question, we definitely invite you, as Derek said, to contact NetProspex with any follow-up questions. To start off, how would you guys determine how many records people need in their database to get to their accurate revenue number by the end of the year?
It's a great question. It's kind of like how long is a piece of string, right? I think we certainly see in the research that high-performing companies are more likely to have a process to back into that number. I think ultimately you need to have good funnel metrics to begin with to be able to essentially back out to that number, right? How many you need to understand from a sales perspective, how many SQLs turn into deals. On average in our research, that's about 20%. You need to also just understand and assuming that everything is equal, but I think it's also helpful to just try to understand whether there's any difference between the marketing-driven pipeline and pipeline that's driven from other sources, whether those close at different rates. So you may have a different number to use. So understand that number, and then back your way out, into it based on how you've defined those stages of qualification and on average what those look like, and then you can start kind of playing around, kind of moving the dials a little bit and saying, well, if this increased or if this changed, what would it look like and how would I be able to move things around? But that's my recommendation is just back into it from the how many SQLs you need to generate a customer and then how effective are you as a marketing organization of helping sales create SQLs.
I agree. I think, from my perspective as I got to think of my role as doing that for my company, right? There's the kind of the bottom-up approach that Trip you covered. I think you're right on. We do that internally ourselves. I think you absolutely have to understand what that should be and where you are versus where you want to be at each of those levels of the waterfall. I think marketing's job or role in the organization, if you want it to be strategic, is to help the company identify kind of the top-down approach to this too. So, what target companies, in the B2B space, we all start with what target companies fit the profile that best matches the need for the product or solution that I'm trying to sell. And I think you also have to do that assessment as well. You have to know who really is my target buyer, not only from a person standpoint, super important, but from a company standpoint. So where do I know that I have a higher propensity for the people at the right roles in that company to see value for the solution or product that I'm trying to sell them? Because at the end of the day, that's what we're all trying to do, I hope, is deliver great value at a cost lower than that value to customers that want it. So that's another thing to think about. And I think, again, back to the assessment capabilities, a good way to understand where you are on that continuum is by analyzing the data you've already got. But I would just close by saying I think it's important to look at it both from a bottom-up and a top-down perspective.
Great. All right, so this next question, just make sure, listen carefully on this one. So we see a response or a touch and a responder, a person, as different, and that a single responder can generate multiple responses. Are you saying the numbers you reference speak to the number of responders and not responses? Do they have that right?
No, it's the number of responses, the number of interactions with a particular contact, particular individual.
Okay,
that's super important that everybody gets a nuance there. And I imagine, some may have, but, to Tripp's 10, right, the Lady Gaga number, it takes a person, a responder, 10 responses to become a customer on average, right? So, the best way to measure a marketing program is obviously its ability to deliver a response. But it's also important to know that in the B2B world, we're dealing with a fairly complex sales cycle that involves multiple touches, and you can't claim victory or defeat, frankly, by just the response alone. There's a number of things that factor into it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll also add that, that's not a monolithic number, right? I mean, it's an average number, but there's going to be certain buyers that come in at different stages that, it may be far fewer but far more important and critical touches and contacts, depending on their role in the decision cycle within that organization, right? So, and there's going to be other folks that, you're going to see a lot more touches with because they're the champion and the primary buyer, and they've been sniffing around what you do for a couple of years, right? They've been educating themselves, and finally the stars align. So there's all kinds of kind of nuances underneath that number as well, and so that's where kind of understanding who that buyer is so important, and kind of what role they play.
Right.
Great, thank you. So you guys mentioned that data management can't be a one-time thing. Is there a certain recommendation for a process or a frequency that you would pass off to the listeners for how often they should be going through their database and making sure that it's kept accurate?
You may have some insight, Derek, of working with a lot of your clients. I mean, from my perspective, I've seen, a couple different kind of models being used, over the years. I think there's firms that, particularly if they have the resources to do it, that, almost before and after every single campaign. Well, there's a couple things going on. That they're doing this before and after every single campaign, right? So they're not letting bad data sit there or even get in there, right? They're kind of taking care of it. There's also a lot going on in terms of even before that, appending data and starting to do some, enrichment, at the point of conversion. So you're not going in and doing it as a batch. You're kind of bringing that new contact in through whatever means, let's say inbound marketing, and then you're doing some data append and doing some validation. Is this contact in our database? Okay, let's merge it. Is it a new contact, right? So then you're doing there's some logic involved there in terms of the next step. So I think, we see a lot of companies that are trying to do this really almost real time or in the activity stream or in the campaign stream. And then I'd say beyond that, it's probably a good idea to do something, on a quarterly basis where you're going and doing, a little bit of a dive through your database and through your contact records, and kind of just there may be some stuff that has, expired, if you will, where you hadn't hit them, right? Where you just didn't do a campaign to that segment, or it's just an old piece of data. So that would be, my way of kind of taking a two-pronged approach to it, both real time almost, and then do quarterly kind of updates or checks on it.
I agree. I mean, I think we see the same kind of propensity to dive into this in our workings with our customers. I think you're exactly right on with, there's the inbound stuff on the way in, and man, you should be doing work to cleanse and enrich that data. And frankly, we've made it easy to do that, especially if you're using a marketing automation platform, so that you're trying to make sure that everything you're putting into your database is as complete as it can be, and has been validated from, a quality standpoint, a hygiene standpoint, so that you don't get in a situation where you're cleaning stuff up while you're making it dirty at the same time. But at the same time, there is this kind of atrophying that occurs in your marketing database. We see it to be somewhere around 2 to 3% per month. We manage, almost 50 million valid contacts here, so we have pretty good stats on how long it takes for a contact to become invalid and what the percentage of that is across a large data set. And 2 to 3% seems to be about the average, which means over the course of a year, up to a quarter of your data is becoming stale. And I think doing it every week seems like a bad idea. You're chasing the tail a bit on that. But doing it once a quarter, maybe every 2 months, provided you can work with a vendor that can offload how much work it is for you as a marketer to do it, is where you hit the point of the right return on the resources required.
Great. All right, I think this is actually all the time we have for today, so I just want to thank both of you again for joining us, as well as all of the attendees. We will have a recorded version available shortly for your reference or to pass along to any of your other colleagues that maybe weren't able to attend. And please remember to follow NetProspex as well as the Aberdeen Group on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn for additional content. Thanks again for attending, and I hope everyone has a great day.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks again, Trip.
Thank you.